So today what we're going to talk about is, first of all, Lauren Brockman here from Bandwidth. And hopefully I recognize some of the names on the call, so it's nice to see some of you again. I'm super excited to start talking about this topic. We've been talking a lot. I've done a lot of webinars on the UC space and innovations there, and I'm excited to start this series on the contact center and AI space. So the today's topics, the current AI, machine learning, contact center marketscape, AI's impact on CX and at scale, because I think we need to talk about that as well. Real-life applications of how contact centers can use AI and machine learning, and best practices for implementations that we've seen so far in some of our customers. That's one of the things we always like to do on these webinars is share experiences that we've from customers that we've talked to, and I speak for Irwin here, and also folks that he's spoken to, and we like to talk about what folks are actually doing, and hopefully those are helpful tips for all of those of you who are in the midst of this journey. So a little bit about Bandwidth. For if any of you all are not familiar with who we are a global telecom carrier. We are a cloud comm provider serving 60 countries and around 90% of the world's GDP. We power all of the Gartner Magic Quadrant UCaaS and CCaaS companies for voice services and messaging, and some of them for messaging services as well. So one of the things about Bandwidth that people often maybe don't realize is that a lot of times when you're using these cloud comms platforms, you're actually using Bandwidth numbers underneath the covers to power some of those services, so things toll-free phone numbers, inbound, outbound calling. We also power some of the world's largest enterprises directly. So there's a lot of reasons why enterprises might want to come directly to a carrier as opposed to leverage the calling plans. And by the way, we're a huge fan of the calling plans for obvious reasons. But sometimes there's complicated call flows or integrations between multiple platforms that people are looking for. And in situations like that, we will serve enterprise customers directly. And I think a lot of today's webinar will be about that subject, about how customers are coming to Bandwidth directly and leveraging us for the integrations into the contact centers and into the AI and bot platforms. And over to Irwin.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. And as Lauren said, I echo the welcome to the webinar, and I'm excited about the opportunity to chat with all of you about AI and CX and how we see that evolving. So just quickly to introduce myself and Metrigy, we spend our time going out and talking to IT, business, and customer service, customer experience leaders, gathering data about what they're doing and why. We're looking at what technologies they're investing in, what's driving those investments, how they're organizing, how they're determining success and ROI, and how they see their strategies evolving over the next several years. A lot of what we try and do is define the characteristics of successful organizations, meaning those that specific in the CX space are seeing higher agent efficiency, higher customer satisfaction scores, ability to increase upsell, and ability to increase customer retention, and so on. So obviously AI is a really hot topic, and I'm really excited to have the chance to chat with all of you about it. All right, so let's start with just a quick overview of what we see in terms of the state of the market of AI and CX. And before we do that, I think we'll bring Eric in and do a quick poll, just kind of level set where our audience is before we go further.
Okay, thanks very much, Irwin. Here's our poll questions. We'll give you a couple minutes to answer. Where are you using content? Are you using AI in your contact center? The choices we'd like you to choose from are you're not started, but you're interested in it. Not started, not interested. You're not started, but you are interested. You have a vendor in mind, but you haven't yet implemented any AI in your contact center, or you have introduced AI in some areas of your contact center, and you have others in mind. So we'll give you a minute to look at that, and while you're answering the polls, I'll just bring Irwin and Lauren both in, and maybe just as a little more context, probably we all know as a given that although we kind of all started hearing about AI in a different way almost a year ago now with the opening of Chat GPT, AI in the contact center isn't brand new. That's fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you say AI in the contact center, as we'll talk about as we go further in, there's so many different definitions of what that means and so many different applications that are out there, and some that have been on the market for a year or two, either as add-ons to other contact center platforms or within contact center platforms themselves. Certainly generative AI and the ability to create content, to easily, quickly summarize content. That's gotten all the attention since, I guess, fall of 22 when we started seeing ChatGPT emerge and a lot of vendors rushing to implement generative AI-based capabilities within their AI platform, within their contact center platforms.
Lauren?
Yeah, no, I would echo that. And I would also say that really depending on what part, we're going to go into a couple of different areas here as the webinar progresses. And I think there's some places where it's more mature and some places where it's just starting and some places where it's least risky to deploy it and some places where maybe you have a little bit more risk and I think folks have been slower to kind of roll it out. So I think AI is such a crazy buzzword, and it kind of reminds me of the early days of Apple where everybody put an I in front of their product name so they would think they were Apple things. I kind of feel like that's what's happening with the word AI here. But hopefully, we're gonna go in and be very prescriptive in how we define these different categories of AI as the webinar goes through, and hopefully, help. I like to think of things in categories. That's just how my brain works, and so hopefully, the way we've laid this out is going to make sense to you guys as well.
Okay, terrific. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move along then. I'm not sure if we have the poll results here, but I'll go ahead and push the next slide and turn it back over to Irwin and Lauren.
Great. Yeah, apologies for the poll. I'm going to hope that most people are at least interested in AI. That's why you're attending this webinar. So hopefully we can give you some insights that'll help separate, some of the hype from the reality. So let's start by talking about what AI is, and again, within the context of the contact center, because obviously there's a lot of different definitions of AI out there. And there's really three core areas that we see AI coming into the contact center and the customer experience space. The first one is supporting agents, helping agents by coaching them potentially in real time, by helping them with optimization of inbound requests or even potentially outbound services, and by improving the feedback mechanism so that you, potentially as a contact center manager, have more insight into how calls are coming in, how workload is being managed, and you can optimize all of that again, ideally automatically through the use of AI. So all of that potentially making your agents more efficient, making them better able to serve customers. And one of the key trends that kind of drives a lot of interest in AI that we've seen over the last couple of years as AI becomes more embedded into the fabric of contact centers is that a lot of what's happening now is in the self-service space. So things like conversational AI, where I may not be talking to a live human being, I'm talking to a bot. And hopefully that bot is somewhat intelligent. It knows who I am. It's got access to a knowledge base. It can feed me answers and potentially even help me close or address and solve some of the challenges or problems I have without ever needing potentially to speak to a live agent. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then lastly, generative AI, as we've talked about, is kind of that hot topic right now, initially led by ChatGPT, but certainly a lot of competing services that are out there right now. And they provide the ability to take conversations and summarize those so that at the end of a call with, say, a customer service agent, a financial professional, healthcare professional, I can get an automated summary. I can capture action items and next steps. Potentially, even in real time, you can be coaching the agents to give them tips to help with call sentiment analysis. So if the customer is angry, you know how to handle it differently than if they're pleasant and they feel like they're having a good call. And we listed a number of the vendors that are out there. Some of these are offering their own platforms. Some of these are offering capabilities to embed into existing contact center platforms. So companies like Cognigy, who have an AI platform that provides virtual agents and bots, live chat, generative AI. Another example, we don't have it on here, but Google, who provides an AI platform that many vendors use to build AI capabilities into their contact center. NICE, providing AI experience management and inquiry routing and personalization of experience, again, based on AI, and Nuance providing bots and agent assistance tools, security and analytics that help you better understand what's happening in your contact center. Lauren, anything to add to kind of that AI overview?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what. Well, yeah, one thing I would add on is that there is a part of the community of contact centers that will want to be using everything from their contact center supplier. But more and more what we're seeing as people will have a different AI platform or a different conversational bot framework, IVR type framework, and that they will want to arbitrage and handle those calls before those calls get into the contact center agent. And so when we're looking at these, these are many third-party applications that are actually in the front of the call flow that you have to then get transferred into the contact center. And this is sort of what I would call the next generation evolution of the cloud experience, where when everybody first went to the cloud, everybody was getting everything from whatever cloud that vendor that was. And then folks started decoupling the various features and functionalities of these, and companies like Google Dialogflow and Cognigy and these others provide services that customers want to integrate into their contact center platform. So that's one of the things that we at Bandwidth have been focused on, is how do we enable that? That's a lot of what we're trying to do in this space.
Makes sense. And just to clarify a mistake on my part, Dialogflow is the Google AI engine I mentioned earlier.
It's the logo's the problem, right?
So kind of thinking about what AI is and what it brings to the table, when we talk to IT leaders, business leaders, and customer experience leaders, there are 4 areas that come up in these conversations is what gets them interested and excited about AI and what's driving their deployments. And the first, is using AI in the contact center, using AI in customer experience engagement to hopefully drive more revenue. So if I've got somebody who's on my website and is chatting and asking a question about, say, a home loan, that maybe there are additional services that might be appropriate, warranty services and title protection and so on, that I might offer as a financial services organization that I can surface to the table. So that could happen within a bot. It could also happen if a live agent is talking to a customer, that they can receive hints and recommendations of things that they should be suggesting. Hopefully, this is also providing a better level of service so that customers are happy with the engagement that they're having and they're less likely to go elsewhere or turn away. Second is reducing costs. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, about the potential to improve agent efficiency by potentially solving some of the more routine challenges. If somebody wants to reset a password or just to obtain an account balance or make a transfer, potentially all of that can be done through a live bot, often embedded with AI to help improve that experience and save the agent resources for the more complex calls. Third one is around, again, both of these sort of leading into that, which is overall improving that customer experience. So if I could get to the right person, that right person has tools and knowledge available to them to help quickly solve my problem, no matter how complex it is, without going through the standard steps of, have you tried turning it off and on again? Then that hopefully makes me a happier customer and it makes me more likely to both recommend the vendor as well as continue to do business with them. And then lastly, again, this one very closely tied to that idea of reducing costs, but it's more deeply focused on improving agent productivity, giving agents the capability so that auto summarization means that they don't have to take 5 minutes after a call and go through the notes and summarize it for the next person, that they're getting coached and having real-time data provided to them so that they can solve problems more quickly and be able to handle higher workloads. I think all of those are key areas that drive that interest in AI. Lauren, anything to add on that side?
No, but I recently I'm always in search of really cool use cases that people are using for this technology. And one of them came with the AI came with PCI compliance and GDPR compliance. So the ability of the AI bot to actually go in there and scrub the customer conversation notes of any PCI and super helpful saving agents time, because then they don't have to go back in there and anonymize the phone numbers or anonymize the name or anonymize. So I just thought that was an interesting use case as you were talking about some of those.
Yeah, definitely, and potentially even reducing risk of data loss or data leakage.
Yep.
Ensuring compliance and so on. So I think that's one of the things that will come up in this common theme as a discussion. Is there's so much you can do with AI. It's kind of hard to just cover it all. So let me spend a couple of minutes going through some results of a study that we recently published. This was a little over 600 companies based in North America, Western Europe, Southeast Asia, and Australia. And we talked to both people responsible for the IT on the IT side for managing and supporting the CX platforms within their organization. We also talked to CX leaders who are responsible for driving requirements, often helping with the decision of what technologies to deploy. And we asked what AI capabilities were you using today? What were you planning to use by the end of the year? So the study was published in May. So it looked at the end of 23. We also looked at the end of 24 and even beyond. What technologies do you have no plans around? And I think the biggest takeaway in this is that slice of that pie that says we have no plans is really small. So that kind of tells you that within the CX space today, how we leverage AI and how we take advantage of it for all those reasons we talked about earlier is really critical. And you can see some of the technologies that are leading the charge. So providing real-time assistance to agents, providing text analytics to be able to understand, say, the sentiment of a call, or even like to Lauren's example, remove sensitive information or make sure that somebody's not sharing sensitive information in, say, a chat that they shouldn't be. Real-time translations, one we haven't mentioned before, but being able to support people in their native languages as they communicate with potentially agents that speak a different language, using things like natural language processing so that I don't have to go in and type a long chat, but maybe I can speak to it, or maybe I can use a ChatGPT natural language type query to get the information I need. Speech analytics and sentiment analytics, you can see all the others that are out there, but there are a lot of different areas of interest in sentiment kind of at the bottom, but also when you normalize out into the 2-3 year time frame, these are all pretty much close to 85 to 90% deployment. So, Lauren, anything to add in terms of what you're seeing?
No, but I love this chart because I call this the yes chart. The question is, are you? And the answer is yes to everything, which I thought was so interesting. Because when I compare this to some of the earlier webinars that Irwin and I did, and we talked about cloud adoption and moving to the cloud and were people going to do that, et cetera, it was never this conclusive. It was never like, yep, absolutely. In the next 24 to 48 months, we're going to be deploying these technologies. So I think the relevance and the timeliness of it is really important, because it's come on to the earlier point. There's been some aspects of this that have been in production for a long time, but a lot of things on that list are really new technologies, and everybody's looking to deploy them.
Yeah, and I think if you're not deploying this, you're certainly at a competitive disadvantage to companies that are successfully taking advantage of the technologies. So, Lauren, I'll turn it over to you to talk about how you're seeing AI used in the contact center.
Yeah. So we're going to focus, we've touched on a lot of these subjects. We're going to go a little bit more depth on the three main themes that we wanted to pull out for this for this webinar. The first one is the customer experience. So this is how do we make the experience better for the person calling in? And obviously virtual agents are number one in this conversation, and also intelligent routing. And I know Irwin, I'll flip to the next slide here, and I know Irwin's got some good data on this one.
Yeah, I think this goes back to what we talked about earlier, that one of the big drivers is making agents more efficient, being able to do more with less, support more complex inquiries with your agents, and maybe offload some of the less complex inquiries. So what we found is that among the trends, among, total transactions that people are conducting within their contact center, they told us that about 38.5% are being done through virtual agents, meaning that somebody often comes to the website and goes to a virtual chatbot, or even they dial in and they get a virtual natural language processing assistant that helps them hopefully answer the questions that they need. So about 38.5% are being managed or handled by those virtual agents. Out of that, a little less than half are actually being solved. So the way to read this chart is the 38.5% are ones where virtual assistants are involved. Out of that, about 42% are resolved with the virtual assistant. The remaining 58% will be escalated to a live agent. And, it kind of tells you that, there's good news there. There's also a little bit of bad news, is that if you kind of do the math and you think about what's that 42.1% of 38%, it gets you to about 16. So out of every 100 calls that come into the contact center, there are 23 that are not being resolved by the chatbot, and the chatbot is being used but not resolved. 16 that are resolved, and then the rest are still all resolved through live agents. So we're getting there, but we're still, I think, in the early days of being able to say that agents are going, and it probably never really will get to that point where virtual agents, AI, are going to completely replace live human beings. So I think where we are today is that there are opportunities to take care of certain issues through a virtual agent, and then also augment that live person so that they're more effective in being able to support the customer experience inquiry.
Yeah. And what surprised me about this graph was that my own personal experience with contact centers, if I think about the place that I call, and because I'm in this business, I always think every time I call a contact center, my mind's always going like, how are they handling this call? What's happening here? Is this a good experience? Is somebody else doing it better? And so when I do that, I actually feel like I come across these bots a lot more than this describes. So I think, first of all, on the sample size of 1 and who I call is a very small subsegment of people that get called. But there's just a huge amount of growth left here and a huge amount of potential to really improve the customer experience by adopting these technologies. And that's what I took away from this chart. There's lots of goodness in the future that's going to come from this.
Agreed. And, we published some other data that I didn't have time to include in this, but it shows that there's a generational gap in the use of, or interest or willingness to use virtual assistants, and that the younger generation is much more in tune or keen to be able to try and resolve things themselves using an AI bot, where people in my generation, we tend to pick up the phone. So I think that's another area of change that we're seeing as the world moves forward.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to share a quick case study that really gets into both the potential for agent efficiency improvement as well as cost savings. And so what we found in our research, just pulling out some numbers, is that the use of virtual assistants allows agents to potentially support more simultaneous connections. So, when you log on to a bot and you get the message that says, an agent will be with you, your wait time is 38 minutes. If you can improve the efficiency of the agents, maybe you get that down to a much more reasonable number. So with the use of virtual assistants, it improves the ability of agents to handle about 8% more chats, so roughly 6 per person. So in that case, excuse me, they're using, again, some of that AI assistant to hopefully provide answers more quickly and really help them. So maybe be invisible to the end user. We found about 38% that are using those virtual agents in conjunction with their live agents, and another 37% that were planning on doing so this year. So in effect, rather than forcing users to use a virtual bot to get their problem done, maybe they still get to a live agent, but that live agent has the power of AI to help them address the customer issues and respond much more quickly. We've seen that the goal of response times is as fast as possible. People no longer expect to wait on hold for an hour, get that dreaded message that we're having higher than normal call volumes. That's really not a good way to differentiate yourself and achieve high customer success scores.
Yep. And I think the age comment there is really true too, because younger generations, they don't even want to talk to people. They just want to text. They just want to chat. So it is really interesting how dramatically that has changed from one generation to the next. And I think having a seamless integration between the chat to the live person engagement platform, because for the longest time, they were very siloed. If you weren't able to get it resolved by chat, then you get a toll-free number, or you could click to call it, or you could dial it, and then you start all over again. But I think there's a lot of room in the middle there for the seamless mapping of customer experience between channels. That's really going to be something that we're starting to come across more and more over the next few years.
Makes sense.
Okay, so number 2. So again, out of our 3 main themes that we're really thinking about here, number 2 is powerful insights. So one of the things that you really want to do is arm your agents when the calls get to them with information about the customer, and then you want to help them make sure that the customer conversations are accurately and effectively documented for future calls, because that context can really help a customer on the other end of the phone feel appreciated and feel like they are known by the agent. So driving better customer interactions through virtual agents and intelligent routing, we've talked about that, but now gaining insights like live transcription, topic analysis, and sentiment analysis. An interesting thing here that we haven't called out specifically to dive into, but I do want to mention with this slide, is also fraud. So part of knowing your customer is knowing that your customer is your customer, right, on the other end of the phone. And so there is a lot of really interesting work going on in the industry right now to be able to identify that the person is who they say they are. And a lot of that is through metadata that's coming through in the phone call itself. So we'll touch on that a little bit more as we go forward, but some of those insights are, in fact, is this Lauren on the other end of the phone?
That makes sense. Yeah, so thinking about, that security one is definitely a big one. Kind of tying in some of the other areas that we've seen for the use of AI. We'll talk specifically about generative AI. So we mentioned this briefly. This is kind of the area where all the media attention, I guess, is going right now. But where we see this in the contact center over the last year, a number of the contact center platform vendors have rushed to get out basic capabilities. So the ability to transcribe calls, translate calls, summarize those calls, identify action items from those calls, and do all of that through automated fashion is really the table stakes as you think about generative AI. The second area is to be able to analyze those calls. So to be able, you certainly send a post-call survey to somebody where they may rate the quality of the experience, but often those aren't returned, or people just don't take the time to fill those out. But if you can do that through the use of application of AI to that transcript, where you might be able to see, were words used that might indicate that somebody had an unpleasant experience, or what was the tone of the call, and so on, and then being able to assess that across the organization and being able to look for trends. So if 50% of my calls are now coming in about a software update that I just released, maybe that's really good information to get to the developers as fast as possible, because maybe there was a bug somewhere in it. And then that customization, how do I get information to people that is relevant specifically to them? So the idea of micro-segmenting from a marketing perspective, where you can drive information to people that, that will tie into their situations, their needs, and so on. So I think that's one of the core areas that we continue to see as people think about generative AI for that customer insight capabilities. Any thoughts there, Lauren?
Yeah, I would just add on that one of the things that makes this successful, and one of the challenges that we hear from a lot of our customers, is just being able to get the data in a place where it can be mined. So I think that that's another place where a lot of innovation is ripe for happening, because being able to aggregate data from all these different sources into a place where you have some sort of machine learning format or some sort of AI application that can actually make sense of it is a challenge, and is something that I think the industry is starting to really innovate on.
Definitely. And so, we looked more deeply into some of these areas and gathered some data about plans for generative AI. And you can see, similar numbers to what we saw in some of the AI data earlier, but not quite as wide adoption. This is a newer technology. People are still trying to understand it, and a lot of concerns about the data. What do you need to? So the idea that if you're implementing generative AI, it needs to be trained on a model, and most AI platforms that are out there today will train on publicly available data so that they can learn, in the course of a conversation, what is typically the next word. But if you have custom jargon, I guess may be a good way to say it, but you have data specific to your organization, it may change what the ideal result is. So the question becomes, how do you balance the training of the model with the protection of data? And we find that companies are really struggling with that right now, or trying to do their due diligence to understand, how do I potentially share data with a third party, but do so in a way that obfuscates the customer information, so that I'm not sharing anything. I'm not giving away any trade secrets. I'm not giving away any personally identifiable information. But you see some of the capabilities that people are using today: summarization of calls, creation of content for agents to be able to use to share with customers. That maybe, here's a report or a document that recaps what we talked about and gives you the best practices of how to resolve it. How do we do classifications of the interactions, the quality of the interaction, creating content for virtual agents and creating content for the customers as well. So a number of different approaches that are out there. Again, all of these still pretty early on the adoption side, 40% or less. A lot of plans to add this year and an awful lot evaluating. So I think this is, like I said, where some of the excitement is happening right now, but a little later on, going back to what we talked about earlier, that AI has actually been around for a while. Lauren, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here, and this preemptively maybe gets to one of the questions that somebody asked about hallucinations, is it's always a possibility when you're asking any machine learning model to do something that it's going to go off the rails occasionally. But what's common about all of these things is there's still a human between the data and the customer. I think the last frontier, and perhaps the riskier frontier, is the frontier where you basically, this last one, content gets created and it's not a very tightly defined set of rules, because most of the, you're going after and what's my account number? This is a very defined set of rules. It's a very narrow question that needs access to a very limited set of data to ask a very prescribed question for something that it should be in a specific format somewhere. Whereas a more theoretical question or leading and where it's not sort of defining these trees in a more tight manner is a little bit, it has the potential to get some bizarre results. And I think where those, as we go on, that will of course get better and better and better with time. But most of these things we're looking at, there is a human in between the data interpreting the data. So, if something gets super crazy, an agent could go, that looks crazy. Obviously not say that to the customer. Okay. So the third major topic for today is improving agent productivity and performance. So we've touched on this in some of the earlier comments, but agent assistance, automatic call summary, call scoring and assistance, CSAT type information. So I know, Irwin, you've got awesome data on this as well.
Yeah, so let me just go through a couple of slides here. So, again, kind of going back to what Lauren just mentioned, how do we use AI to just overall make our agents more effective and potentially reduce the cost of staffing in a tight labor market? So some of this ties into what we talked about earlier. So using generative AI to create call summaries as an alternative to having to have agents, type up a summary or take notes during the call. Agent assistance applications, again, to bring information to that agent that tells them, hey, maybe you want to suggest this product, or it sounds like your customer is a little upset. Maybe you want to, back off a little bit, take a deep breath, or be more empathetic on the call. The different ways that we see the coaching is available to the agents. We talked about the use of virtual agents, and then even, again, kind of coming back to that transcription. So not only do you have the summary of the call, but you have the full transcription, and you can see that more than a half on average of people that are using that as well. Okay. And then, So what we see that some of the benefits of using this is that you're essentially optimizing the agent staffing that you have. So for companies that are using AI, they're hiring, on average, they were hiring 39 new agents this year is what we found in our data. And that's, again, broad across a variety of different company sizes. But for those that weren't using AI, they were hiring almost 2.5 times as many agents over the year. So about 91 agents that they were planning on hiring. So if you do, again, some of that math, you could see on average, you could save over $4 million in staffing costs by augmenting your existing agents with the use of AI to take advantage of all of those capabilities that we talked about earlier. The chart on the side breaks that down by company size. Again, you can see clear benefit. The bars in green are those who are not using AI, and they're seeing more than, in some cases, almost 2x or even more than 2x new agents being hired versus those that are using AI that are able to reduce the number of agents that they're hiring. And they're also starting, again, to use more and more of these capabilities to solve customer inquiries. So we talked earlier specifically about virtual bots, but this is just overall the use of AI to support, not only bots, but also live agent assistants. So the agent themselves are getting information that helps them solve that inquiry. So today you're seeing, on average, 30 to 45% or so of inquiries that AI is helping to resolve. That companies are expecting is going to go close to 60 or north of 60, depending on the size of the company, by 2025. So, as the AI itself improves, as the deployments get more widespread, as companies get better about taking advantage of it, we see some real value there. Lauren, anything to add on that discussion?
No, only that, with the customers that we've been talking to, I'd say that without the specific data, this definitely seems to be in line with what we're seeing when we're talking to our customers.
Excellent.
Okay, so we always like to talk about real-life examples of things, and I know Irwin's got a couple of examples, and I've got some too, so we'll transition, I think, into what people are actually doing, and hopefully these things will resonate. And, of course, we love comments and questions because what we really want to learn from the webinar is, does this resonate with you? Is this what you're seeing? What can we do, especially us as Bandwidth, what can we do to facilitate and help you in this journey? So with that, why did I double click that? Well, we both hit it just at the same time. CX, as you've seen for all of the data, is the biggest driver for AI adoption right now. So to better serve customers, to improve customer ratings, make agents more efficient, generate more money. You'll see save money down at the bottom. I don't know, a lot of times we think, that should be the number one driver. And typically speaking, it's true. Although the interesting thing that we also see with AI is it's not like, you implement it and I save money everywhere, because what you're actually doing is investing more in your technology and more in your communications expense. And what you're trying to solve for is not necessarily fewer agents, but those agents doing the things that matter. I mean, yes, if your business isn't growing, then maybe you are doing some swapping out, but hopefully all of our businesses are growing. And what we're trying to be able to do is to make customers happy over here and then also slow the growth, but it doesn't get rid of the growth. And I think Irwin's earlier slide about what the hiring discrepancies were between the customers who were planning to implement and the ones that weren't, the 3X there, really, I think really solidifies that idea. So, just a quick graphic. I won't spend a lot of time on these, but just visualization graphics to sort of level set what we're talking about and what we're thinking about here. This is a typical customer journey without AI, and it's pretty much a customer calls in and they hit an IVR, and that IVR may be voice enabled or it may not be voice enabled. It may, press 1, or it may say 1, or it may say, ask me what I'd like to do. Those are sort of the evolutions of the sophistication of the IVR. But in all cases, the agent receives the call, and then the agent's got to figure out what to do. Is it something that they can solve with? Do they need to transfer up to another issue? And then the issue is resolved. You typically ask for a CSAT survey and get feedback and try to make the process better. But with AI, where the agent's actually coming in is obviously further down the line and hopefully less frequently, because hopefully you're able to solve things really quickly with your virtual agent. So the call comes in, it hits the virtual agent. Virtual agent starts the troubleshooting. So tell me a little bit more about what's wrong. Oh, I see you want to know how much you need to pay. Here's your bill. Would you like to pay it now? Press 1, sends you to an automatic payment bot that will take your credit card number, pay the bill, and it's done. Versus, or your flight's on time, or your flight's not on time, or your doctor's appointment's at this moment. And then if none of those things help, then the call will go to an agent, and then the agent will do the troubleshooting. But now the agent has all this information that helps them do a much better job of solving the customer problems. Hopefully the customer's resolved back to the CSAT survey and feedback into the contact center. So just a brief visualization sort of the various things we've been talking about and how they fit into the contact center flow.
Very cool. So, and even if you think about those kind of scenarios, maybe there's additional information that the AI engine is getting through sensors, through being able to do automated testing and so on. So I'll share with you a case study that we gathered from a healthcare organization. And in this case, 15% of calls were resolved through an AI-powered chatbot. Again, this could be a scenario where if say a patient is wearing a monitoring device, that inquiry or that conversation could be both initiated by the patient or even initiated by the contact center if they detect an anomaly. But here, about 15% of customer inquiries were being solved through chatbots. The cost of the chatbot was roughly $5,000 a month. That was to build and implement. They were saving over $5,700 a month in agent time as a result of having that chatbot. That was the initial pilot. And then what they found when they did a full rollout is they were still spending only about $5,000 a month. But now because they had rolled out to all of their agents, they had increased their savings to over $32,000 per month. And then giving on average that each call was generating about $80 to $200, having those calls be more efficient, having them potentially be resolved without necessarily bringing a human in was generating some pretty significant opportunity for cost savings, irrespective of even some of what we talked about earlier in terms of being able to add, maybe even drive additional revenue. In this case, it was mostly focused around making the agents more efficient and saving money through the contact center.
So what are some things to think about as you're starting this journey? We always like to share what our customers have shared with us and things that we think are best practices that might be useful. So there's a lot of vendors out there. This process requires vendor research. It just does. There's no way around it. Every single day, there's something new that somebody's doing. It is so cool. Like, you read about the feature releases from these big platforms, and I'm constantly amazed at the imagination of the people who develop these platforms and what they've been able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. But it does require some research. You got to test it first. Test and measure. So most of our customers who have implemented these, they generally have after they've done the research, they generally narrow it down. But it's important to test because you want the ability to not be locked into any given thing. I think that's the biggest fear that people have, is that you make a decision and you go with it. And then what if that provider's innovation doesn't keep up with where you want to go? What if you find something new? How do you move around? What are my options? Ensure security, compliance, and governance is appropriate. This was probably obvious, but there are companies out there that literally specialize in in voice bioauthentication. And the company that does that might be different than the company that's providing your voice IVR or your bot, which might be different than the company that's providing your contact center agent management software. So how do you integrate those all together? And then in particular, adding in the new tools that help you with the authentication on the front end is really important for security and fraud. So just selfless plug for shameless plug for ourselves, but we have a call verification tool that will give you a fraud score based on the calling number and other attributes of the call at the time of call. We also have partnerships, as an example, with companies like Pindrop, where if you want to do the media forking over to them so that you can get real-time biometric authentication on somebody's voice or something, that also returns a call. And then that can influence how you set up your IDRs, how the agents answer the calls, what scripts they ask when that call comes in. So there's a lot of really new technology that's really cool that's coming out there. So obviously it's moving quickly. I hit that one about 15 times. And then so how do you prepare? How do you prepare for that change? How do you build this in a way where you've got these plug-and-play elements that are easy, easy-ish, I will say, but easier than in past to integrate and make changes to your call flows, to your call patterns? How do you do that and make that easy? And of course, bandwidth, what we're doing in this space is trying to make the connections to any of the platforms that you want easy. So we're not trying to say, hey, choose Cognigy or choose Dialogflow or choose NICE or choose Genesis or choose, not Five9s or any of these companies. If I've left your company out and you're listening to this, it wasn't on purpose, because we truly do. It's like picking your favorite child, and we as Bandwidth don't do that. We are agnostic to the platforms. But what we do want to do is make it really easy for you to orchestrate call flows and media, tip invites and media, which is essentially what we're talking about here, and messaging in and out of these platforms. And I like to think of them as every platform is like a country and has a different plug, right? You go to travel to, the UK, you got one plug. You go to Germany, you got another plug. You go to the US, you go to Canada, wherever, you got different plugs. Same thing is true for all these platforms. Integrating into each of them requires very specific rules and very specific technological decisions in terms of being able to connect. And what we at Bandwidth do, or trying to do here with our Maestro platform, which we launched in another shameless plug, but we won Best in Product from at Enterprise Connect. So we're super proud of that. But I know these developers who built this, and this was so cool to watch it get built. But anyway, we built a visual builder and integrations to a lot of these platforms so that you can pick them and orchestrate them. So this little small picture here that you see, we're going to have some future content coming out that will be like 201, maybe 301 level on these topics, and we'll literally can show you videos or show you live demos of exactly how this works. It's super cool. But basically, you just pick something that you want to integrate into, and that integration will ask you some questions like, I might need a tenant ID, or I might need to pick a codec, or I might need to do a thing. To the extent that we can automate that, it's been automated. And then you just drag and drop those various things into your call flow, and they just work. So this is very cool for this. Our initial rollout is inbound contact center, and we'll be adding messaging and other features to it in the future. And very interested in your feedback on this, by the way, because how you guys think about it will definitely influence our product roadmap. But our goal here is to cut out the development time and build a really flexible way for you to integrate into whatever you want to integrate into. So these are just some of the examples of some of the integrations we have today, and we're going to be adding more and more as time goes on. We've obviously got interconnections into the various cloud platforms, to AI companies like Cognigy and Dialogflow, into the contact center platforms like Genesis and Five9. So, and then, like I said, we'll be adding others. Our customers are largely driven by what our customers are interested in us interconnecting into. Okay. And I think that was it for me. And I think we're exactly at 50 minutes, which is what we wanted to be, which is fairly remarkable. We never do these things just on time. But anyway, so we're going to open it up for Q&A.
Okay. Thanks very much, Lauren. And yeah, we'll remind everybody in the audience that we do have almost 10 minutes per question and answer. So please do send us your questions. We've got several great ones to start out with. And the one I want to start out with is kind of picking up on where we were near the end of the presentation here, where you talked a little bit about some of the partnerships that you have, some of the companies that you work with. And it seems to point to the idea of maybe, and Irwin, maybe you could speak to this from an industry perspective, and more in kind of continuing plans from bandwidth that when how the enterprise sort of shops for AI, or how you enable AI, is probably more of an ecosystem kind of a view, rather than somebody's just going to, you're going to go to one vendor and they're going to sort of turn on AI for you or something like that. How would you recommend that people kind of think about how you put together solution, overall a strategy and solutions that gets the most out of AI?
Do you want to take that first?
Yeah. I'll take that one first. So, first of all, I think much depends on the resources that you got and the size of your contact center. If you are, a smaller company, if you are a company that's maybe not, maybe your business model isn't simply people calling in all the time with questions, then all of the leading contact center platforms are starting to build features into their own platforms, and they may be sufficient. But I think researching what the industry is doing and what the various leaders are, and you can look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant or other places to find outcomes. I think it is worth checking them all out. What we typically find for people at scale is that they're integrating more than one platform. That's almost universally true. So, and honestly, because it's hard to be awesome at everything, right? If I'm building the most awesome agent management platform out there, and that's what I'm focused on doing, am I really going to be, building a generative AI, bot, or am I really going to be focused on, text to speech and speech to text into, a bot framework? Somebody else is doing that, and they're doing that really well. And so what we typically see is an IVR AI bot vendor in front of calls that come into a contact center. What we also see is call verification or call scores or fraud scores being integrated. That's typically yet another vendor, and having that being integrated into the agent experience, typically into the contact center platform itself.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Lauren said. It's usually what we see as vendors going out and looking at their contact center partners and looking at what integrates into that, and trying to build, a full ecosystem versus, I'm just going to go off and buy a separate AI platform.
Right.
Okay, terrific. I'm going to ask this next question. I suspect there's a very short answer to it, and maybe also a longer answer. Someone's asking, do you have any concerns about security and privacy when using generative AI?
I could jump on that one first. So yeah, there are two areas where we see, major concerns. So the first is, I think you brought up the question of hallucinations earlier. How much can you trust generative AI? Do you have a human that takes the results of the generative AI and interprets it, and hopefully doesn't just share it without analyzing it themselves to see if there's potentially false information within it? How do you make sure that the training is protecting your data? So if you are allowing a third-party partner to train on your data, that data is staying, the large language model is staying entirely within that, isolated from other customer data. And so that's part of the due diligence that Lauren talked about earlier. I'd say the second area where we see a lot of concern right now is a lot of what generative AI does is generates additional content. So it's generating transcripts, it's generating summaries, generating all sorts of additional capabilities or all sorts of additional content. So what happens to that content? How do you archive it? How do you store it? How do you make sure that if you're in a regulated industry that you are supporting whatever compliance rules that you have? If you are a multinational, that information is remaining resident within different countries based on global rules. So I think those are the two areas, that compliance piece, and then just the security of your data that we see companies wrestling with. And certainly a lot of the vendors have gone out of their way to ensure that either A, they're not training on your data, or B, if they are, that they're doing it in isolation from other customer data and with your permission.
Right. And then, in addition to that, like I touched on it before, authentication of the person who's calling. So, there's a lot of there's just there's bad actors out there and do bad things. And, getting into accounts via the contact center is a huge problem. And so making sure that you've asked the right questions, that those questions are based on data that hasn't been breached or leaked, right, already, so that somebody would know the answers to them. At this point, I kind of joke, like, I think my social security number's out there. I'm just saying, I think anybody could probably find it if they wanted it. It scares me to death. But hopefully that's not the question you're asking me to verify myself, because it's not a particularly secure one. So hopefully you're asking me other things that, that are a little bit more secure. So. Did we lose Eric? I know Eric was he's put in the channel, but he was having some battery issues and that we might lose him. Let's see. I think we do have time for one or two more though. So maybe I'll just jump in and try to find some in our group chat. Let's see. We already answered the multiple vendors. Apologies, I'm reading in real time since we don't have our wonderful moderator. Let's see, for virtual agent resolution rates, this one's from Matthew, is there a bifurcation between low and high complexity interactions?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one first. So yeah, definitely. What we often see is that the simpler requests, I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, are more easily resolved through a chatbot, through a virtual agent, and the more complex ones have to get up to somebody. So if I'm rescheduling a flight, maybe I can do that completely virtually. But if I need to apply a flight credit and reschedule for a different day with a different route, that may be something that I've got to go and talk to a live human being for. So we have seen that over the last few years that the calls that are getting to live humans tend to be much more complex than the calls that may in the past been the first stop was a live human.
And here's an interesting thing about that. That doesn't mean that agents are happier. It's a really interesting statistic that I read that was like, we all get tired, and agents kind of count on those easy wins for like, oh, thank God they're not all really hard. So another thing that we have to remember when we're loading in only the technically difficult questions with the agents is how to manage and motivate those agents and reward them and give them breathers, because cognitively, it's a lot more tiring. So I never even thought about that, but when I read that stat, I was like, yeah, it'd sort of be like, makes total sense and something that people have to manage. It's great from a user experience because they don't have to wait for the easy stuff, but it can make your agents burnt out. So you have to manage that as well. So, and I think that's probably time for us. Scott, you're welcome. It was great to have you here. I'm just reading through the questions now. And thank you for the thank you.